going on, guys? It's Spunkify here yet again for MMOBOMB.com, and welcome back to the Free-to-Play Podcast, episode 101. Today is March 9th, 2014, and as always, I'm your intrepid explorer. I'm going to be leading you into the jungles of free-to-play MMOs and gaming in general, and watch out for this over here, and we're going to go explore this over there, and I hope you're ready for the journey at hand tonight as my trusty and always present sidekick, the guy with the machete. We've got Jason Winter. Jason, how are you doing today?
Okay, you can jungle, but I'm going to take mid.
Okay, wait. You have the machete. You have to jungle.
Well, no, you said you wanted to lead us through the jungle.
Yeah?
So,
oh, that's true. Oh, all right. You take the mid, I'll take the jungle. Then I need the machete. But I don't know.
Yeah.
You have like the chest hair and the muscles. You just look better with the machete, man.
Not with Morgana, I don't. I don't have chest hair and muscles.
Oh, God. That would be terrible. Holy
crap.
crap.
Now I've got a terrible image in my head. And
Someone's going to
send bad fan art in, I know.
Morgana with chest hair and burly muscles. I gotta see that now. Even if someone doesn't make it, I'm gonna commission someone, an official Riot artist, to make that.
We'll find a way to put it on the site if you send it in.
Exactly.
We'll find a way. It'll be like the header of the next League of Legends article we do.
Yeah, that could be a skin. Burly Morgana.
I don't know if I want to show it to Riot. We'll just leave it, make it our own thing.
It could be good. Riot, please give us Burly Morgana.
Please don't.
Burly Morgana. Oh, or maybe they should do Gangplank then shaved. You know, no hair on his chest, none of that stuff. Or down below, that is. That's where his hair originated.
No, now we're not even...
That's original Gangplank, truth be told. The original Gangplank. That's where the hair was. But getting into where the hair isn't is the news right now. And we've got quite a lot of news to talk about, to pick through today. Some good news, some bad news, some interesting news, some news to sort of provoke some thinking. You know, we're always wanting to get you guys in your own minds thinking about what you could possibly have in terms of an opinion towards some of the articles that we talk about. But to get us started here, let's go ahead and jump right into the news. So, we're talking about End of Nations this week. There were some new news about End of Nations, Jason. And the new news is that there's no news.
The new news is the bad news.
The new news is the bad news. The new news is the news that you don't want to be getting when you're looking forward to a game. Especially when it's like one of your last dying hopes for anything resembling an RTS in the free-to-play genre. You know, I actually checked, Jason. By the way, End of Nations is completely removed from all of Trion. That's the big news. Basically, Trion has wiped it from existence. It is no longer anything that they reference. It's as if they have completely shunned it from their spoken lips, Jason.
They technically said it's on hiatus, but yeah, whatever.
Technically, it's on hiatus since 2013. According to Trion's PR manager, who we reached out to, Anais Gragub, I hope I pronounced at least part of your name right. He said that they were putting Elder Scrolls Online, End of Nations. They're putting End of Nations on hold, and we're currently focusing the company's energy and creativity on Rift, Defiance, Trove, Arcage, and some new projects they'll be revealing soon. So, our Archage.
I think it is Arch. I think it's
Archage. Yeah, there's two games, Arcage and Archage. Sometimes
Archblade and Archage.
Archblade. That's what it was.
Yep.
Arch. Tricky. Archage. With Archage here, you know, they're an upcoming sandbox MMO they're focusing on. So with End of Nations, we kind of seeing that the game is gone from being a open sort of large scale RTS to a slightly not as large RTS, then to a MOBA, and now to vaporware. Well, I guess you can't be vaporware if you actually existed at one point.
I did play it.
Yeah, I did play it too. I played it in a beta, and I played it at EA, so I know it exists somewhere. There's a stick of truth. It's on a USB somewhere. You know, someone has the original code. So yeah, End of Nations, for all intents and purposes, it's been shut down for the foreseeable future. There's no development towards it. And if we look at other development of RTSs in terms of free-to-play RTSs recently, we can see that they've also, development on them have been shut down. Or in the case of, say, Homeworld, which was an RTS being developed by some of the original creators of the Homeworld series, or sorry, Hardware Shipbreakers.
Yep.
was created by the Homeworld developers. It was to be free to play, but then got officially backed and became a buy to play game. So we're just seeing free to play RTSs left and right, sort of just they're disappearing like candles. You know, just the flames on candles, just going all the way. You know, being extinguished left and right.
You got to think about an RTS analogy. They're being eliminated like Zergs fighting Terrans or something.
Or humans fighting vampires. They're just extinguished,
whatever.
Something like that. They're not adapting, Jason. The free-to-play industry is a wild and dangerous place, and it seems though RTSs are dying out as a breed in free-to-play. Jason, why do you think that is? What is it that we're missing here that RTSs just cannot survive in development? For a lot of the larger ones, a lot of the newer ones are dying off in development, let alone release. What do you think's going on here? Is there something in the water, Jason?
Well, I mean, I wouldn't think it's the gameplay, because I mean, again, there are RTSs out. You say they're dying in development as opposed to release. You know, obviously there are RTSs out there, and they get made, and they're pretty good games, a lot of them.
Mm-hmm.
And I wonder, a while back we were talking about we were talking about some MOBA, I think, and he said you just can't put an aggressive cash shop or something resembling pay to win in a MOBA, or anything that you have planned to make an esport, because you don't want people to get the advantage in their sport, such as it is, by spending money. They have to be able to have it through skill and through advancement and so on. And I almost wonder if maybe that's a little bit of the issue people are having with free-to-play RTSs, is that, if say, for instance, StarCraft was free-to-play, you'd expect that the Terrans and the Zergs and the Protoss would all be relatively evenly balanced, and you wouldn't think, okay, if I've got a Zerg against a Terran, I have to do this. And you don't want to think, well, I'm going to have to do even more because he spent money to make himself better. It is that kind of competitive esportish kind of attitude.
I was just going to say, or even like maybe unlock different units or unlock different army compositions.
Yeah, exactly.
Because when I played Command & Conquer, for example, which also was shut down in development, the reboot of Command & Conquer series that was free to play, they had sort of generals that you can unlock and gain access or purchase that would just slightly change what special units you had access to or what special abilities you could use. And that was the only like major change to the gameplay mechanics. Otherwise, the army that you choose, the faction, had the same units. And so for me, I kind of wonder if, okay, on that one front, you can kind of understand, okay, they can't make a cash up version of a unit. And why is that? Well, that's because everybody has to have access to the same units for it to be balanced, right? Like you said, for it to be an esport, everybody sort of has to have like a knowledge and access to the same units or the same information as everybody else. If there's new units being added all the time, that significantly changes your ability to sort of react to what that composition or what that player strategy is, because in an RTS you have so many units and those interact with each other and strategies can form off of that. But I'm wondering, Jason, do you think that maybe it could be because cosmetic items aren't as easily applied to real-time strategies? I'm wondering, because that's sort of usually what games fall back on, is cosmetic items for making their money. But in an RTS, where you need to be able to discern what a unit is that actually difficult to pull off, in your opinion?
It might be a little more difficult, but I would think it'd be possible. I mean, as long as you can tell a tank from, like a personnel transport, a big tank with a big gun versus a boxy truck kind of thing. You can customize those with different colors. It could be red or blue or green or whatever you want. It might need to be a little bit of color, I guess, some sort of color. If you have if we're both of the same faction or whatever, we're fighting each other. Because then I guess it might be a little confusing, because normally it'd be like the red versus the blue or something like that. But yeah, I mean, between that and just the fact that I don't know that you care as much about your individual units, because they're all, you're gonna have 10 tanks. Do you really care that much? I guess it would be.
If the tanks looked awesome, I would.
If it's the green horde, I guess that would be kind of interesting that they take it in like that. So, but yeah, I think in general it is just a lot of, again, just the fact that we haven't been able to see a good free-to-play RTS makes you think that maybe they're getting hung up on the monetization, that they're not getting to the point where they can figure that they can do this without putting in, not to say the End of Nations was pay to win straight up, just like that, but there's always that temptation to put in just that little bit of incentive to get you to spend money. And maybe they're just not figuring that it's a strong enough market to be able to do that and take that kind of chance.
Yeah, it's funny with RTSs. Oftentimes, they often sort of prolong their lifespan by having mods applied to them by player, releasing new single player campaigns. That's of course a huge part. There's a large part of people who play StarCraft just for the single player. So when you get games like End of Nations or the new Command and Conquer, who didn't have really single player components, or at least strong single player campaigns, maybe just missions. That's another thing that may be sort of negative in the sense that, okay, what you're used to normally that's always present in an RTS is no longer present in an RTS. It's not a part of an RTS. And that sort of just goes along, in my opinion, with, I think, another reason that potentially there could be a falling out of RTSs, and that's because what do we have, Jason, when you look at it, what do we have outside of real-time strategies that are strategic games that are available free to play? Can you name a couple of genres that you can think of? Like subgenres of strategy. I
mean, you could almost say tower defense at some level.
Tower defense, the time-based building games that you have so often in browser, like casual. There's those that are considered strategy games, the casual base building ones. Mm-hmm. You have turn-based games, which there's actually several free-to-play turn-based games out that aren't bad. Gun Swords is one that I can think of. You also have the new Dogs of War, which came out. That's very nice, sort of AAA looking, based on a very popular tabletop game. So there's even representations with turn-based. But then when you get to live action games, something like an RTS, there's one genre that I can think of that's really prevalent right now in strategy. Can you think of what I'm thinking of? Are you thinking what I'm thinking of, Jason?
I am not Brain.
You're not Brain? Well, MOBAs are taking over the world.
Oh, okay. That was a Pinky in the Brain reference. Are you pondering what I'm pondering?
Yes.
Okay.
So I'm the Brain and you're the Pinky?
I guess so.
Okay.
I think so, Brain.
I think so. Man, now I gotta go watch that show after this.
So anyway,
references.
MOBAs are semi-strategic in a way.
They're strategic in the sense that there is strategy to them. There are builds. There are sort of like they're fast matches. You have to think on your feet. It's different in the sense that you have a team, whereas usually in RTSs you don't. But I mean, if you step back and think about it, it sort of makes sense. MOBAs seem to be the in thing right now. They're sort of easier to make. It seems like in developers' mind. Otherwise, why would there be so many MOBAs in comparison to RTSs? And you even have End of Nations, which turned itself into a MOBA from an RTS. So it just kind of seems like a progression,
And it had the multiplayer aspects that you were talking about as being something, as opposed to like we think of a lot of time in the RTS, just 1 versus 1. So
yeah, exactly. So it kind of seems as though people are just look at MOBAs as more of a safe bet. Even if maybe the MOBA is not going to be the most popular one, it seems that it could be popular enough because people are looking for other MOBAs for them to try it versus people who are looking for other RTSs. And I don't know. Do you think that there's still a place in free-to-play right now for a good free-to-play RTS? Do you think that it can be executed? Do you think people are just scared? Developers are just scared to push that out? Or
well, when you mention MOBAs, of course, the reason they are exploding is because League of Legends was so huge, and now Dota 2 is also coming along really strongly, and that's probably what it's going to take. Someone is going to have to make a really good RTS, probably something that has, like we talk about, the nice and happy cash shop, and it's going to have to do really well. Once that happens, it'll open the floodgates. Now, who's going to do that? When is it going to be happening?
Ubisoft.
For a while.
Ubisoft has in War Online, a browser-based RTS.
Okay.
Maybe that's going to be the one that cracked the scene open.
I have a hard time thinking browser-based anything is going to be that huge of a deal, though.
Yeah, I know.
There are some good ones, but it's just that's not going to draw in the hardcore people, I think.
Yeah, it's got to be a title you can download. I mean,
yeah.
Ubisoft, I have to give them credit. They are making an RTS. I'm not going to sit here and say that there are no free-to-play RTSs currently in development.
And I still don't know what that Total War thing is. It's supposed to be RTS MOBA, whatever they're calling it.
Yeah, the Total War, where they're taking the Total War series and making it where you basically control like set types of units, like
you control like 3 units. You're supposed to control like 3 units, and you'll be on a team with other people involved.
3 sets of units, I think, like three battalions, basically.
Something like that. I don't know exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's that type of real-time strategy, which that actually sounds kind of interesting. Like it could be something unique, even if it isn't a full-blown RTS experience with base building and such.
Sure.
But I'm still looking for. I mean, I grew up on Age of Empires, which Age of Empires, of course, was a free-to-play strategy.
It was, and it was awful because, as I recall, they only had like 2 free factions.
Yeah, and you had to buy units. There was units that you could purchase in the shop, and they actually changed a lot of that later on, but it was sort of like too little, too late.
Yeah, they were too late. They'd already gotten the bad first impressions. It was like Allods in their in the way they started out.
Exactly. It is already they couldn't get the steam afterwards, so the game still runs, but there hasn't been any development on it in a couple of years at this point. I also looked through the other RTSs that we have on MMO Bomb, and out of the RTSs that we have on there, none of them are still active. Other than Airmech. Other than Airmech as an RTS, which you could consider Airmech more of a sort of tower defense in some ways in RTS. It is real-time strategy that you build units, but the units you don't sort of micromanage them and have them move in groups so much. You kind of just tell them to go in directions. But yeah, it is a real-time strategy. But we had the Battleforge, which was closed, probably one of the most popular and successful real-time strategies, which incorporated card mechanics. And then we had World of Battles, which was somewhat of a Russian, kind of like Total War clone, but done with fantasy. It actually was sort of unique. There wasn't really too many other games like that. And that's also recently shut down as well. So in that sense, we don't have any sort of AAA real-time strategies in the traditional sense at all right now. It's completely barren, save for what maybe Ubisoft is creating with In-War Online. So yeah, I agree with you. It's going to take a big one. Maybe it'll be Valve, maybe Valve
Blizzard. Maybe Blizzard could take a StarCraft and make a StarCraft Online.
It just seems like it's too popular of a series for them to not milk it. It's kind of like Diablo,
sure.
They have to come out with a $60 expansion just because it's like their main IP. I think they would have to create a brand new IP to make it free to play from the get-go.
Sure.
But you are right that Blizzard has actually been making StarCraft progressively more free. You can play StarCraft for free right now. You can play the arcade for free. You can play pretty much everything except for ranked ladders and campaign for free. So you can still have an RTS experience, although it's not necessarily built around a free-to-play experience. And you, as a player, aren't getting the full experience versus your peers who may have purchased the game. But if you like StarCraft, there is options for you to play it for free. Things to consider. Let us know, guys, if you are still on the lookout for a really good free-to-play RTS. I'm still going to be buying RTSs, even if they're not free-to-play, because it's like that first genre that you fell in love with, Jason. It's just you can't leave it. It's always going to be there. It's that first white buffalo. Moving on, if anybody got that reference, kudos to you. Moving on, we have a little bit of MMO sort of a discussion. And the topic of discussion today is regarding housing in MMOs. Jason, you actually recently wrote an article. We sort of talked about what's up with the housing in most MMOs. It's like not actually innovative. They haven't really pushed it too far. Because we had some recent announcements regarding SOTOR getting some player housing. But from the trailer, which you showed me, Jason, it seems as though there's kind of just like everything else you would expect in every other housing that we've seen in the last, 6 MMOs.
Yeah, stupid Star Wars old, probably not doing anything interesting or innovative. No, really. Almost everybody does. Even if you take something like I played around with Rift's housing when it came out. And that was kind of neat because you could get all the different parts. You can resize them whenever. You can rotate them around. It's almost like EverQuest Next Landmark, but on a smaller scale. And it was kind of neat to do. But, and this is my thing with housing, it just always seems like it's something that everybody wants and everybody says you got to have it. People have been asking for it in World of Warcraft for a decade. And yet you get it, you can put stuff in your house, and then what do you do with it, really?
I don't ever see any viral videos about housing. Do you?
I mean, you see people post screenshots or something about, when it first comes out, when they first get their new stuff. But then it's like, and I actually, when I bought my big house in Lord of the Rings Online, I had some people over. We had a little housewarming thing. Someone brought me a painting to hang on the wall, I think.
That's really cute. That's
well, like 2 people, I invited my whole guild, like 2 people showed up, but whatever. But that's the thing, is I did that, and now I just go to my house when I need. You can teleport there, so it's like a quick little port to that area of the world. There's some storage space, and that's like all I use it for. It's not like it's just a place where I put stuff.
See,
Which is kind of like maybe you have your real house in real life, but
yeah, but at least in your real house, there's like functionality to it, I guess. Like that,
yeah, I have to go there, I guess, to sleep and whatever. But yeah,
yeah, and it's kind of funny, when we're talking about housing. Housing really hasn't changed. Before we talked on the show, we were talking pre-show that housing really hasn't changed too much in the last forever of MMOs that have housing. Like pretty much, we were looking at Ultima Online, which came out in 1997. It had housing to start with in 1997, and you bought a plot of land and then had to put a house on it. So in that sense, essentially, housing has only sort of evolved now to where instead of just plopping down a house, you can plop stuff down inside of a house. And it has, of course, the 3D elements to that. And so there's been some changes. They added some functionality of what you can do in your house and such. But the core idea of housing has not changed. And I'm wondering, is that just because housing in general cannot change? Like, you can't really do, you can only dress up a horse so much. It's still a horse kind of thing. I pulled that saying out of nowhere, by the way.
Do you dress up your horses?
I dress up my horses. It's just dressage, right?
Dressage.
Get it? Dressage.
When you parade around on them, okay.
Yeah, after you dress them up. No.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think that there isn't it's tough to figure out what to do with them. And again, people just say, "Hey, we want housing," and they don't. Devs don't necessarily know they want anything more. They don't know what else to put there. But I compared it to like cosmetic armor, or cosmetic clothes in an MMO, where it's something you can put on and it makes you look a little fancy. But there's not a whole lot of gameplay to be put there. You don't have, if the female character's wearing the dress with cleavage, she gets, +2 to attack because she's distracted the other guys. They're not going to do something like that. Just like they're not going to give you, there's not really any sort of gameplay thing you can have. Or not, I won't say there isn't, but it's kind of hard to envision gameplay with a house.
And therein lies the problem, maybe. Because you can't wear your house around.
Yeah, you can't even bring it around like you can with your cosmetic on. The best you can do, like I said, is get screenshots and post them or whatever.
So then doesn't it fall on maybe the developers to find ways to get other people to come look at your house, or give incentives for other people? Get incentives for the house to feel less detached, essentially, from the main world. Because I think that's a big thing, really, is the sense that a lot of the player housing in several of the MMOs, with a few notwithstanding, the housing in there is just instance. You go to a portal somewhere and then you're teleported to your house, quote unquote. Mm-hmm. But everybody else uses that portal too. There's, for example, I can think of DC Universe Online. DC Universe Online has its own sort of layers and hideouts that you can go with your heroes and supervillains, and you can choose where you want that layout to be, layer to be rather. You can choose like where the city you want that to be, but the actual location that you enter in that city is the same for several people. So you only choose like key points, like waypoints essentially. And that area is where you set up your base. So it's not actually your base. And we do sometimes have, of course, games that do have a real sort of placement of locations. In the EverQuest series, the new ones, EverQuest Landmark and Next, have real world sort of placement of buildings and structures that you can go and observe and enter and such. But then again, it sort of goes back to the whole functionality. It's there to look at, it's cool, but aren't there ways that we could sort of bring in the players more, or just interact with them more, without it just being like, oh, I'm coming here to tend my garden because I'm not a mighty warrior, I'm a farmer, don't you know? Yeah,
I'm really surprised that a lot more games haven't tried to do, especially sandbox games, haven't tried to do some kind of make it into a combat situation where you're maybe a house, maybe it's more of a fort, something you have to build. But it's one thing to be in PvP and defending castle whatever from the other server or for the other people, other faction. It'd be something else entirely to be defending your castle, the one you built, or to be attacking something that someone else built, and something that again, because in PvP and in open world PvP or whatever, you're gonna recognize that the castle that you fight all the time, and it's going to be the same thing every time. Whereas if it belongs to someone else, and there's a different variety there, there's, if you make it yourself, you can change up the layout or whatever to, facilitate defense. So that seems like a really underestimating sort of thing that you could really do. And I know you talk about that a little bit with Mighty Quest for Epic Loot, where they do kind of have that situation.
Yeah, the only difference is it's sort of reversed. There's not really a sort of hang around cosmetic, just chill area of Mighty Quest. Every dungeon or every castle you enter wants to kill you.
And, I'd be fine with that. I'd be fine with that being the situation instead of having a house, a sort of, relaxing place.
Exactly.
Let you hang out in the main city or something for that.
Aren't we like mighty warriors that go out and slay dragons and like giant demons, Do we really care about what we go home and bake in our ovens at the end of the day?
If I were that kind of character, I'd have a house with spike traps and lava pits and all that.
Exactly, because all my enemies were coming to try to kill me.
It's my training course, if nothing else. Nobody shows up.
Now, that's an interesting idea. What if you went out and killed a boss, and wherever your housing was, the boss's henchmen or someone bigger than the boss, he would come to try to assault you at your base, like an NPC invasion, essentially.
Yeah.
I think that would be...
Because that's what you always do to the NPCs. You always go and invade their house, so why can't they come and get yours?
Exactly, and that even brings open like the possibility of having guards, NPC guards. See, there's a whole lot of things that you can do to sort of spruce up housing, where it's not just like, oh, let's go visit grandma's. We're going to go sit in recline chairs and marvel at the things on the wall because there's nothing else to do there.
Now, obviously, this is a whole lot of balance issues and so on.
Exactly,
and but yeah, it's sort of thing. If you built a game around it, like you take something like Landmark as opposed to most other games, where they're making, at least for the moment, it's all about the building stuff and making the houses and whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot more complex. They have a lot more to it. I don't think you could just slap this into World of Warcraft or something like that and just do it there. It'd have to be the main focus of the game, I think.
Yeah, we're talking about like adding in NPCs and stuff. It sort of brings me to WildStar. Of course, that's from Carbine, not free to play, but it does have what's called war plots in it, which directly sort of correlates with having something other than a house. And the war plot is basically a base for a guild to own, and you can make your own war plot and add to it. Add different buildings and defenses, most importantly, because it ties into the PvP of WildStar, the in-game PvP, where you have two war plots that are backed up to each other, and one side is trying to invade the other side's war plot and do something nefarious, of course, steal loot or what have you. And so it's up to you to design a war plot that's most effective at defending it outside of you yourself. And they mentioned one of the sort of interesting things about the war plots is the fact that you can take bosses or monsters that you've defeated out in the real world and place them in those war plots to sort of defend it for you. Of course, they're weakened. They're not exactly the most powerful versions of what you faced, but it does serve as diversions. It does serve to impede their progress and potentially kill players. So do you think like that is a step in the right direction, but do you think it's enough of a step in the right direction?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's great, giving you something more to do with your housing. And I'm not upset about the instance nature of it that much, because I think it's just a question of scale. Like you can't, I'm not saying you can't, but it'd be really difficult to have, if there's 10,000 people on the server, each person having their own house, you'd have to have this huge area to make up for it. Again, if you build your game around that completely, like in Landmark, then it's okay. And even they have multiple zones, multiple islands, whatever to do it on. But that's not the sort of thing you can really do probably in most games. I think you have to have some sort of instance nature to it. So even with that, I think having it be like that for war plots, I think works out fine.
I definitely think that like in terms of workable space out in the world, like in an MMO, ideally I would love for everything to be out in the real world, out and interactable. We know that early on in Planetside 2's development, they said that they wanted to add bases that like a clan could build.
There was supposed to be sort of like sky dropping in a base, or supposed to be something like that.
Yeah, there was supposed to be a lot of stuff in that. But yeah, it hasn't there. But I honestly think that even if we forgoed normal housing and just had guild housing that was real world persistent, allowed for players to attack that, sort of like war plots, and for them to defend and have NPCs and such, I think that is a step in the evolution of housing. And not everything has to be combat related. I think that's one thing we have to remember, is that not everybody loves just the combat of MMOs. So there are people who just like decorating their houses and whatnot. But we certainly can add more dual function. We can add more stuff for you to do outside of just maybe crafting something there. Just essentially, if you have things like crafting inside of a house, you're just doing something you would have otherwise done in like a main city.
Sure.
You know.
Or ideally, what you'd have is you'd have either like an NPC does it in SWTOR, or something like a station where you press the buttons on the machine, and maybe 20 minutes later out pops a sword, so you don't have to stand there and do stuff the whole time.
That is what kind of like
Swordomatic.
Swordomatic. You need a sword, push the big red button. Yeah, we had the Warlords of Draenor, which is World of Warcraft's upcoming expansion. They actually have sort of like servants that help you in your. They're finally getting housing, but those servants, they do like tasks and stuff as you're out, which sort of makes you feel a little bit more heroic. Like you're not like, oh man, I don't want to go and farm these cabbages or something like that. You can go off and still kill dragons while instead your servants farm cabbages. There's things like that. So I'm curious, guys. What are your impressions of housing? Do you enjoy housing in its current iteration? I actually don't do anything with housing, really. I don't. Like, I just have no desire to do so. But I'm curious, from those of you who do, what are your impressions on current MMO housing? What would you guys like to see be added to housing in the future? All right, now, so still keeping on that sort of sandbox vibe, Jason, we're going to talk a little bit about Albion Online. I'll be online, Jason. Get it? I'll be online.
Online, yeah, sure. I'll be online.
I'll be online. Haha. See, I think it was unintentional, but it's still good. I'll be online playing I'll be online, a new sandbox MMO that's currently getting really, really close to a official alpha test. The MMO is actually cross-platform, which is interesting. It's going to be available on Windows, Linux, Mac, as well as mobile devices, which may perk some people's ears and sort of alert and a little bit of apprehension. It's being developed by a studio called Sandbox Interactive. I guess we kind of know what their focus is.
Right?
Yeah.
Strict theme park, yeah.
They're going to make a theme park MMO with the name Sandbox Interactive. They're 12 guys, 12 official guys, 9 freelancers. They've been in business since 2012. This is their first game, and it's quite the ambitious title. Let's just say that it's cross-platform, no levels, anyone can be anything class, permanent death in the sense that when you die, you lose your gear, and you have to get it again. So very hardcore in that system. With the no levels, that means there's also no linear growth, which means that if you were a badass player and you have awesome armor, a couple lower, sort of not as high quality geared players can take you on, perhaps kill you, get your loot, and then they're the badass character. It's not about how long you played. It's merely about unlocking new items for you to craft or someone else to craft, and basically going out in the world and finding out how you like to play your MMO character.
Which will probably be to murder other people and take their stuff.
Exactly. Albion Online is very much seems like a PvP focused sandbox MMO. There are 800 territories to capture in Albion Online. 800. And basically, outside of just the sort of tutorial starting areas, there's no buildings or structures to speak of. It's like a brand new world, essentially. A brand new world. That's a little bit redundant. But it basically means that you're going to be going out there and creating over 50 different kinds of buildings, each of those serving a purpose, from like, crafting to, being a housing, like we just talked about, and just other necessary buildings to sort of create settlements. And you create these settlements as guilds, and then you go out to try to conquer and capture other nearby settlements, just like real life, which is pretty interesting, I have to say. I haven't really seen a game in a while that sort of executed all of what it's asking or saying to do in a very efficient manner. The only thing that sort of has me concerned about sort of the cool things that they have coming for Albion is the fact that it is going to be on mobile devices. And Jason, how are you? What are you someone who's like, okay, this is going to be on PC and mobile? What's your initial reaction to games like that? Are you inclined to still play them, or do you think it's lesser quality because of that kind of cross-platform? What's your impression?
My initial reaction is that means it's going to be a lot more simpler. I mean, it's not going to be, 20 things on your hotbar, or even probably even like a really intense. Well, I guess there are some sort of FPS-ish type stuff in MMOs or on mobile devices.
Mm-hmm.
But just looking at the little bit of demo you got on the video on their site, it looked a little based on like the viewpoint they gave you and everything. It gave me just a little bit of kind of like a League of Legends-ish kind of feel in that it's got that kind of top-down view.
Real pull back.
Yeah. And it's sort of thing where, and League of Legends would be the sort of thing that could maybe work on mobile because you just you click to move around. You only got like 6 buttons basically, or 8, I guess. 6, yeah, 6. So yeah, I mean that's the sort of thing where, sure, it's going to be on that level. It's not going to be your typical hardcore MMO with all the features you necessarily expect with that, but it's the sort of thing that can work out in that simple fashion.
Basically, it looks like you have about 5 or 6 skills, and the way the skills work is instead of your characters, since you don't level up a particular class, you just sort of level up everything and choose what abilities you want to use to suit your armor and playstyle. Because you can wear whatever armor you want. You can combine like sword and shield with cloth armor, which we've seen in games before, where they try to do the cross-class combinations. But the actual abilities you have are bound to the items. So you bind the abilities to those items, and certain items can only have certain types of abilities. So you have to really sort of take that into account when you're trying to craft your class. And it almost sounds a little bit like the system that Path of Exile has, whereby you put those gems into items, and depending on what gems you put into the item, you may slot something that gives you a passive bonus, or an active ability, or may augment that ability a little bit. So it seems to be a little bit more towards that line. But the combat is, like we talked about, it is dumbed down. It's
so you click on a guy and that's how you hit him. So
you click on a guy, he uses the mouse to click around to auto attack, and then there's some skills. It looked like for a keyboard, it was like maybe 4 skills, 5 skills. And those skills for mobile devices were just available to touch on the touchscreen. So there was 5 or 6 skills that you could trade out if you wanted to, of course, outside of combat. But you're looking at basically ARPG numbers of skills, just without the sort of button mashing of the left click, essentially. Which, to be honest, I mean, if we think about, if the combat is meaty enough, if your swings are meaty enough, or your spell casting is meaty enough, you can get by with it being tab target or being, sort of click around, and the limitations, because the animations make up for it. The graphics themselves aren't actually that bad, considering it's a cross-platform. It does look more cartoony, but it doesn't, they sort of make use of what they're given in terms of real estate. And what's interesting is that since it's cross-platform, everybody plays together, you would think that the experience for everybody would be sort of slightly different. But there's another video they showed whereby they were moving all the characters at once across the different devices, and it seemed to move pretty fluidly. Everybody was sort of moving realistically, able to move around and do all their spells without much trouble. So I have to give it to them. They seem to at least be understanding of what it's going to take to make it a fluid experience. That being said, Jason, would you play this? Of course, it's still in alpha. There's still things to be added. But on the premise of what it is and knowing the platform, does that scare you off from trying it?
Well, normally you'd try to present me with a PvP full corpse looting kind of game, and I'd be like, I don't want to do all that work just to have it, one guy, ganks me and I lose it all. And I wonder about that a little bit with the crafting. I wonder how intense the crafting is in terms of how long it takes. If it takes you 6 hours to make a decent sword, and you step outside and 2 minutes later you're dead and someone takes it from you, that's going to be the sort of thing I'm not going to really like. But on the other hand, if it isn't that bad of a thing, if there isn't a whole lot of build up to get to your power, like you said, there's no leveling, no classes, so just what equipment you have, then I almost see it more like almost like a game like DayZ, where you start off with nothing, and if you go around, you might find some stuff, or you might kill someone to take their stuff. And if you die, well, you just lost the last half hour or so after you got, and you start over again. That I think can work. I think as long as there isn't a huge build up to, there isn't a huge time investment for what you need to get your stuff.
Yeah.
Then it's going to be okay. Now they do talk about some things like there's no talk about the player made economy, how there's no real transportation, and there's weight management. You have to actually transfer items. You physically have to haul them to other cities to do stuff with them or so on. I wonder how much that can work, because again, I can load up all this ore and take it to the next city and make a sword out of it. Or I could just find someone along the way, kill them, and take their sword. It just seems like that would be a whole lot easier. So,
Or you could set up ambushes, look for people
right.
who are trying to transport, and then I mean that's the thing. That's the beauty. It sort of reminds me a little bit of like Eve Online.
Yeah, it could be. And I've heard the same sort of thing about Archage, how they
Hmm.
have also caravans and so on and so forth.
Yeah, you have to. It does sort of invoke a need for people to do those jobs, and that's what really I think differentiates sandbox games from a theme park is that there are not just roles in the traditional sense of healer tank. There are roles as in people who are traders, who are merchants, who haul goods for other people, who protect. It adds so many other sort of features that you don't necessarily think about when you first think about what a sandbox is different from a traditional theme park MMO. And even though the combat in Albion Online would be more basic, there seems to be a lot more for you to think about and do.
Yes.
The combat is only like a part of it, if you will. There's still other parts of the MMO that give rich experiences, perhaps. Because we see that with even EVE Online. I don't think there's anybody who says EVE Online combat is like exhilarating. I've played in big battles in EVE Online. I've been a part of some of the largest battles in EVE.
How many days did it take you?
Like 4 hours? Like, okay,
Yeah.
4 hours. I'm not even joking for one battle. And that's because it's so slow. Everything slows down. And it's not these epic battles that you're thinking of, where even if you did have action combat, I wouldn't be able to click anything.
Because there's like there's 1,000 other ships out there. You just fire a laser off at some direction here to hit something, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
There's no, I can't aim anything in that
No,
sense.
no real strategy, yeah.
Yeah, well, there is strategy, but it's strategy on a large scale, not strategy
Sure.
on an individual player scale. Everybody just acts as drones, essentially, and fires at one target together simultaneously, which is pretty cool to look at, but not so much to play. So in this case, it's a little bit, they showed some of the PvP, you can chase characters around, heal your friendlies. There is some movement, it's not just sort of RuneScape level of combat where you just stand in front of each other and auto attack. There is movement involved, and it did seem like players were trying to kite a little bit. So I definitely think that for what the platform is, for what they're trying to do it across, it is a worthy attempt. I kind of wish they would have went for more like hit a button to auto attack, sort of like less tab target, essentially no selecting, because we've seen action-ish games on tablets and such where you can click a button and your character swings his sword as you move around and such. And I would think that would have been like the one thing that they could have done that still made the combat easy in the sense that it wasn't as like in-depth as other MMOs, but gave it a little bit more. You want to feel those swings when you push that button. You gotta feel it. You gotta feel it. So,
Are you feeling it?
I'm feeling it, man. I'm totally feeling it. Yeah, I've never played a game where I lost everything when I died. Scratch that. I played EVE Online. Of course, I played a game that
Sure.
lost stuff. But there was even in that game, there was things you could fall back on. There were ships that you can go. You had insurance to gain some of the resources lost. And that's sort of the thing that's interesting about Albion is that when you die, you go back to your housing area, wherever your house is set up or wherever your place of residing or living is set up. And so you can re-equip there. It says get your next set of loot out and whatnot, and then continue on. With the resource gathering, how it works is no zone is essentially better than another zone. You can find all the resources you need everywhere. So that doesn't mean that like a large guild can control a really, really important resource and no one else can access to it. So that way they control the market. That actually occurred and occurs quite frequently in like EVE Online. I personally think the way Albion is doing it is pretty useful. I would say I do see the sort of benefit of having places that only have one resource because it does create the demand and sort of a tussle or a war over that. But are you on board with having everything available everywhere in a landscape, or do you like more sort of exclusivity where you can get certain resources?
I think I like the way they're doing it better because otherwise it just makes it so much harder for new people to get into the game. If they get in, 6 months after the game comes out and all the good places are already taken. You want to have it be a little more homogenous.
Yeah, you want to have it, I think that's one thing with sandbox style games is you don't want all the good places to be taken, snapped up, and you're left with the sand, dunes out in the middle of nowhere. And you're like,
well, guy's sitting in this golden palace. You got like a a literal sandbox. It's where you live.
That's sort of something that I worry about with like EverQuest Landmark. I'm gonna get in like day 2 and I'm gonna just have my own little sand dune. I'm like, oh, this is all I have here. Dang it. All right. Well, overall, there's quite a lot to look forward to with Albion Online. The alpha is nearing. It's going to be in, I believe, the 27th is when the short little alpha test will begin for Albion Online. You guys can check it out by visiting the website. I'll put a link down below. You can sign up for a chance to join and participate on that. It is a actual alpha, not a beta in disguise, so keep in mind there are things that are obviously going to change, but let us know in the comments if you guys have gotten a chance to play it, whether or not you think that, you know, the game, you can't judge a book by its cover. You can't judge a platform by its device.
By its buttons or something.
By its buttons, yeah, something like
Actually,
that.
probably don't tell us if you played it, because it's probably under NDA. So.
Who knows? I think in this case they would want it to not be under NDA, so people can be
I
like,
suppose
oh,
so.
yeah.
But you might also not want people getting a bad first impression
Yeah.
if that's their thought. So.
Well, for those of you who enjoyed Ultimate Online and Dark Age of Camelot, Albion Online's developers say that that is exactly the sort of style that they're going for. Although there will be safe areas, so you're not going to just be continually griefed no matter where you go. So yeah, if you're fans of those games, then definitely go ahead and check it out. All right, Jason. So it's been a long week here at MMO Bomb. We started quite the undertaking with the MMO Bomb free-to-play Showdown Extravaganza.
That was the secondary title that I had in mind. I actually went through a few, but I just was like, you know,
Extravaganza.
it's Showdown Extravaganza. Yeah, I just decided Ultimate Free-to-Play Tournament. I kept it simple.
Yeah, well, I would have voted for Extravaganza. It's a good way to describe how everything's been going on. I just wanted to sort of course, by the time everybody watches this, we'll have gone through just another a set of voting. There's still ongoing voting happening right now between several large contenders. And Jason, I kind of wanted to talk to you a little bit about how you think it's been going, how you think the showdown's been going. We'll talk a little bit about the fan reactions, what you guys thought of the showdown, and I guess first of all we should talk about the fact that this isn't proving one game is better than the other. No, I feel like we've said that a lot lately.
Yeah, I mean it's just something that we gave a try to. You know, we're mimicking like the basketball tournaments that are going to be starting up soon, and just to give people a chance to vote for their favorite game and see who has the most passionate fan base and who's willing to put the most effort into promoting their game and making it seem like the coolest thing ever.
Yeah, we've seen a lot of players actually react and get behind it. And we've seen some developers retweet, which just so you guys know, the only sort of form of notification we gave any sort of developer was just a simple tweet we gave everybody that's saying, hey, your game's in this competition, come check it out. We've seen some retweets from developers, some support from developers through tweets. We've also seen support from developers maybe giving out free items, which we neither condone nor,
buying votes. What is it, Chicago?
Yeah, I know. What? Like, we just let it out in the wild and see what happens. That's what we did, guys. We just let it out in the wild and we wanted to see what happened. And a lot of things happened. You had the companies who did nothing, absolutely no support for it. They didn't sort of at all acknowledge it or what have you. And sometimes that led to their demise. Dota 2 is a prime example.
World of Tanks. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Both of those games surprise upsets because of the fact that there was not a developer response either from Twitter or any sort of player letting them know.
Yeah, let's say it's not even just developers because I don't think I know obviously we know that Smite's been getting a lot of votes, but I think that's just been people on Reddit, right? Fans.
Exactly. That's what I was getting to is the fact that we saw a lot of players who even games who didn't get developer support like Smite. They got a ton of Reddit support from their specific subreddit. And even forums for other games. Marvel Heroes was an example that although they just recently lost to Smite, their community was trying to rally to sort of make it a closer game. They did. I think when Smite...
They did, yeah. It was, when I first looked at the matchup, like the day, like there was 2 days in between. I looked at it after one day and I was like, oh, Smite is like... It's like 93-7 or something was the percentage.
It ended up being like 63-37 or something.
64-36, yeah.
Yeah, 64-36. So a lot closer. I mean, they made up 27% or something like that. It was quite an undertaking of them, and so they have to be given props for that. And that's the thing. That's what we've been seeing from some communities. We've really seen a lot of communities sort of get behind their games and really try to promote them. Mabinogi, that's a game that that's like the little engine that could, man. That game, everybody just wanted that game to succeed. I got so many comments about Mabinogi trying to succeed, and that's the thing I think that most people are just enjoying out of this. I know that's what we're enjoying out of it. It's not about who has the better game mechanics or who has the better community, what have you. It's just about which community can rally behind their title and really sort of show support, even if the game itself isn't considered to be like a top contender among other popular games now these days. Because I think we forget a lot every time we go through a new year. We forget about the games we've left behind. Games that we maybe never play again, but there are players who are dedicated, who go day after day, play those games. We saw that with Ragnarok, we see that with Mabinogi, and it's sort of interesting just to see who comes out of the woodwork, essentially, to get these games promoted. And has there been any sort of particular game, Jason, that you've been rooting for in person?
Well, I can't. I don't want to say that I've been rooting for something because I don't want it to seem like I'm.
I know that, but
now that said, of course, being a longtime Lord of the Rings Online player, I was kind of pulling for them. I really wish they would have been able to come back, or if they'd even announced it, if they'd gotten onto it a little earlier, they could have maybe overcome Mabinogi back in the first round, but didn't quite work out for them. Now I didn't want to notice on that same round, I didn't even realize this pairing until after I had finished it, but I saw Planetside 2 versus Card Hunter, and I thought that is the Spunkify matchup right there. He'd be torn if he had to choose between those.
I know. Well, I actually have moved on from Card Hunter. I finally got. I played it so much to where I could see all the glaring balance issues, and that made me have to step away from it, essentially. Gotcha. But I still play Planetside, so I guess I would have sided with Planetside in that. But I do vote. I do vote in every one. I do vote. Just because I'm a fan. I'm a gamer.
Vote once, just like everyone else.
I vote once, like everybody else. I vote in all of them, even if I like one game more than the other, or I like both games, I still vote because I like supporting it. And I think
you've probably played most of these, unlike
yeah, I have played most of them. I actually could be one of the only people who have played most of the games, if not all the games listed on here, and actually have something that I could say about each one of them. The current lineup is League of Legends versus Blacklight Retribution, DC Universe Online versus War Thunder, Infinite Crisis versus Path of Exile, and Terra versus Hearthstone. I have to say that I'm rooting the most for Path of Exile out of the group, just because I actually don't play very much Path of Exile, but I like it so much because of the free-to-play microtransaction setup that they have, and just the developers are really awesome. So I just like to see games like that with really sort of open and unrestricted free-to-play models succeed, because it gets them a lot of support. But overall, a lot of these titles is hard to choose from. I kind of root for all of them. I played all of them extensively, at least for 10 hours each.
And that's one thing that people were talking about earlier. Like, why do you have an MMO versus an FPS? And I'm like, it's because you don't just play one of them, probably. Most of you play more than stuff. That's why you can have DC Universe Online versus War Thunder. They're not similar games in any way, but I've played both. A lot of people out there have probably played both. So, I mean, and you just choose which one do you like better, or which...
All right, Jason, which one do you like better?
Between the two, God, they're both things that I want to get back to at some point, but I probably would choose War Thunder.
Yeah, I would choose War Thunder too. We'll see, though. I mean, people chose, what was it, Ragnarok Online over Dota 2.
Yeah.
I was floored. I was absolutely floored. But, that just mixes it up. And suddenly people are like, oh, Dota 2 League of Legends are going to be in the finals, and now Dota 2 is not in the finals.
Somebody said, was why don't we just do Dota 2 versus League of Legends?
That's why you don't do Dota 2 versus League of Legends, because it can change. Things can happen. Upsets can happen. Mm-hmm. They happen all the time. But I'm looking forward to these weeks upcoming. If we look at what is next after these, we've got the Rogue Division, which is Ragnarok Online versus EverQuest 2, Pirate 101 versus Mabinogi, World of Warplanes versus Planetside 2, Star Trek Online versus RuneScape. So we'll see.
That's the close. That voting is going to close on Wednesday, and depending on when we post this, the next one might be up. So why don't you run through those matchups?
All right, and then the matchup after that, would be the Wizard Division, which is Eden Eternal versus EverQuest, Airmech versus Heroes of Newerth, Neverwinter versus Warframe, APB Reloaded versus Wizard 101.
That's a great matchup there. You got the hardcore criminal badass gun,
and then you've got like the children.
And Wizard 101.
Yeah, Wizard. Come on, Wizard 101 against APB Reloaded. You know, it's kind of funny. We have what was it? Mabinogi versus Pirate.
It was not intentional to put that in the Wizard division either. I didn't realize that until after I named them.
They actually made a comment about that.
Yeah, I know.
On
I saw
Twitter.
that. I know.
The developers of Wizard 101. It's like, how fitting that we're in the Wizard division. Yeah. But we have, I think one of the interesting ones is going to be Pirates 101 versus Mabinogi, because both of them have huge, like very, very dedicated fan bases. I mean, maybe not huge in comparison to some games, but extreme. We saw people I'd never expected come out of the woodwork from Mabinogi and Pirate 101. Just so many comments for both of those games. So that's going to be one to watch, definitely, if it's not already over by the time this posts. In the Wizard division, yep, APB Reloaded versus Wizard 101. Neverwinter versus Warframe. I'm curious to know how that plays out. I'm also curious to know how EverQuest versus Eden Eternal plays out, because you've got a relatively old but very dedicated MMO and its fan base, and then you have Eden Eternal, which has basically everybody who's playing an anime MMO. So yeah, we'll see how that goes, guys. But otherwise, it's been pretty exciting. We still have several rounds to go before the ultimate Warrior versus Cleric versus Rogue versus Wizard division. And I'm looking forward to it, man. I got my popcorn here. I'm strapped in. I'm ready to see what happens next. All right, so with that being said, why don't we go ahead then and move on to our D-bombs and A-bombs for the week. I will go ahead and go first. I'm going to give a D-bomb to South Park Stick of Truth, the new RPG from the collaborators at, of course, the South Park Studios and Obsidian. Very, very well done South Park game. It's surprisingly well done, not only aesthetically, but also how it's written. And it certainly does South Park justice, and doesn't just simply play on poop jokes like the old N64 games.
But it has them.
It has poop jokes, of course. It has to have poop jokes. But it is very well written. The dialogue in it is very, very funny if you're a South Park fan. And as an RPG, it's not bad either. It's not the most in-depth RPG, but you can certainly see where the Obsidian sort of mentality of development when it comes to character development in RPGs sort of has permeated throughout the South Park universe, and it all comes together very, very well. And I have to give a D-bomb just because I'm enjoying it. I'm not done with it, and still enjoying every minute of it. Can't wait to get back to it.
Yeah,
Jason,
I haven't watched South Park probably in at least a dozen years, but I was watching someone stream it the other night, and I was just cracking up at some of the stuff they were doing.
Yeah, South Park as a show has actually gotten a lot better over the last 12 years. Matt and Trey Park, they have both gotten a lot more mature in their style of humor, and they make a new episode every 6 days, so it's always relevant, I guess. Jason, what's your A-bomb D-bomb?
I've got an A-bomb for a little thing that I read about over on Kotaku, actually. And you remember a couple weeks ago when I had the thing about the British organization, legal whatever, they were going to restrict free-to-play games, whatever. And I said, there might be some reason to put a little regulation into video games, but I don't want the government messing around with it because they're not going to know what the hell they're doing. So this article was... tax plan would screw quote-unquote violent video game companies. And supposedly it's in the Tax Reform Act of 2014. It's supposed to prevent tax credits to makers of violent video games. To which I'm going, well, what the hell is a violent video game? What qualifies for that? Because, yeah, okay, your typical blood-exploding, corpse raping, whatever kind of game. Sure, I get that that's violent, maybe.
That's more than violent.
Sure, corpse raping, yeah.
Corpse raping takes it to a new level.
But what about, at least a rated T game like Tomb Raider or something like that, or a typical MMO that has, guys with swords occasionally killing.
Even Angry Birds is that violent?
Is Angry Birds violent? I don't know. See, that's the thing. It's like when I said in the thing for the other thing, it's like, well, you can clearly tell what a game for kids is. That's what it said in the law, and I'm like, really? So now we have the same thing here. It's like you can clearly what a violent video game is. Well. What? Who? What? Where?
I know plenty of adults that play Wizard 101.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean it's not violent or not for kids or
it's terribly violent. It's worse than APB.
It's worse. Have you not seen what they do to little? No.
No,
I played Wizard 101. There is combat in it. There is violence
yeah,
in Wizard 101.
you do have to like chop off. Well, you don't chop off anybody's heads, I guess, but you do like swing your sword at the bad guy and he
Yeah.
evaporates or something.
You use your imagination that you're chopping off limbs.
Sure, sure.
There you go. Imagination
They're gonna put in
accomplishes so much.
they're gonna put in the blood and gore patch with the next expansion.
Oh, I can't wait for that. It's gonna be Wizard 101 rated M for mature.
Yep, yep.
Member highlights. In terms of member highlights, we have one from Neokiva, who says A-bomb to SOE, who continue to use I always get these guys' names wrong. It's Prosibensat. He says to read it Prosibin shit. To do the EU versions of their games. Because, and I quote, "We here at Sony want the EU players to get the best support for your region." Which is BS because the company is worse than SOE. I've heard very negative things about that company, who I will not try to pronounce again for fear of butchering it. Prosibensat. I've heard some negative things about it. I cannot relate, seeing as I'm in the United States. But it's sort of interesting to see that SOE is just giving up support and just giving it to a whole nother company. I thought SOE with their new games and coming out with all these really large scale MMOs that are sort of turning heads, they would want to sort of make sure everything that is involved with it are managed by them personally. But I guess they have faith in them.
I mean, you see that with a lot of companies when they're offering their services to games in other territories, other continents especially. I know, like you have, what's the big Chinese company?
Tencent?
Tencent, yeah. They operate a few different games over there. I want to say they were doing Eve for a while, and then someone else got it. And, so...
League of Legends?
Yeah, League of Legends. But, yeah, and then I know Lotro was being done by Codemasters in the UK. I think they might have switched off of that.
I think it's a case of just like, this is the major publisher in the area. And so, as the major publisher, they are going to have access to resources that smaller publishers are not. And I think SOE just feels that they know the EU market better than SOE, which is up for debate. If SOE doesn't want to handle the EU, that could be for several reasons. Either they're not up to the task, or they don't have the time. There's a lot of things, because managing a whole another region with its own rules, regulations, and stuff like that is best suited, I think, for a company that's normally situated in that region.
Yeah, I mean, look at Archange for Trion.
Exactly.
For example, Exile Games makes the game over in Korea, but Trion's going to operate it over here. So.
Yeah, it's a flip. It's just maybe, in personal opinion, it's too bad that company got it. But inevitably, it's hard to say that the experience that you're going to get with that company is worse than what you would get with a company who is not locally based. So let us know what you personally think is wrong with that Prosibensat publisher, Neokiva. Maybe perhaps there are some things that they've done to you personally that you would like to share. I'll be listening. I sound like I'm like some kind of like therapeutic person. I'll be listening.
Just call in now. 1-900-SPUNKify.
Tell me what's wrong. I'll be listening in this voice. Jason, why don't you go ahead and take the next member highlight?
All right, this is from Just Me, and he says, if I could give an A-bomb to someone, that it would probably go to Google because they're slowly but surely turning YouTube into a big piece of shit, and they suck it dry until it dies. Tell us how you really think, Just Me.
Yeah, tell us what you really feel.
YouTube.
I mean,
the thing is, the big thing that we've had lately is the copyright strikes and all that crap, which should be something that they should actually have a person to watch over, but it's the sort of thing that would happen no matter what kind of video service was being produced, whether it was YouTube or whoever.
Inevitably, when you get to a certain size, there are going
it's about the legal repercussions. That's a law in the United States. It's not a law that YouTube decides on. It's what they have to do. They have to be compliant. They could do a better job of it, certainly, but some other company, if they came along, would probably be just as crappy at it.
As Batman... Or sorry, it wasn't Batman that said it, but as Harvey Dent once said,
okay,
you either die a hero or you live long enough to see yourself become a villain. So once YouTube was the hero, able to allow anybody to upload practically anything to its servers to display to the world, it has now become the villain. And thus, LiveLeak has become the anti-hero, the Batman.
As I read a while back, YouTube actually came out... it started just a couple days after the Super Bowl where Janet Jackson's nipple got exposed. So it was kind of the hero. because it allowed people to see that video.
Wow.
Yeah.
I did not know that. Thanks for telling me that. It's a little bit of nugget of information I'm going to take with me now from forever ever. I'm just going to like drop that at parties now. It's going to be a great little tidbit.
Did you know that YouTube is in existence?
Started because of a nipple slip?
Yeah.
Food for thought.
A wardrobe malfunction.
Oh, yes. A wardrobe malfunction. Alrighty then. So, the question in the last week was, what were our thoughts on releasing games through early access? I think with all the hubbub about the 100th episode, people forgot that there was a question of the week, which is all right.
So excited to see Magic Man.
I know. We'll have him back very soon. I got to have him back. There's a song, guys, in the works that I can't wait to share with you.
That.
Yes, there's a song that we made out of the episode, which it's quite good, but it needs a video to go with it to be even better. So just wait for that. Hopefully we'll have that up soon.
He says it's a song we made. I however, take no responsibility for it.
Oh, you added your voice unbeknownst to yourself?
Yeah, I was about to say, I was forced into it.
Well, okay. Well, I guess I have to get you to sign the NDA.
The waiver.
A waiver before we release it. But it's good, guys. We call it, just to give you a little teaser, we call it the 8-track butter. Or the butter 8-track. It's about butter, guys. It's good. You guys should watch that episode 100 if you haven't yet. It's if you're a fan of butter, you're gonna love that episode.
And who doesn't love butter?
So thoughts on releasing games through early access. Jason, I really wanted to get your opinion on this because we didn't really touch on this last week. What are your opinions on releasing? Because we just had, for example, Hawken, which was on its own platform, then put on Steam through early access, which nobody could access it unless they paid, before then going back into open beta on Steam. What are your sort of opinions on early access in general, and early access when it applies to free-to-play?
I'm generally not the biggest fan. I mean, I don't really like playing in betas, just because I don't like playing an unfinished game that's buggy or that has all these other issues going on with it. So this is even like, I mean, a lot of early access games I tend to think of are even more primitive than that. A lot of them are alphas. Unlike Hawken is pretty good. That's obviously been around for a while and it's still pretty easily available. But a lot of the early access stuff that you tend to play, like I don't know, it always feels unfinished to me. It's like I'm not the kind of person who's like, I must get into this game now, immediately. I know a lot of people are like that. I just tend to be, I guess, a little more patient with it.
Do you think it's more detrimental to the game's development than it is beneficial? Because a lot of people think that with games in early access, free-to-play or otherwise, a large portion who get in early can potentially get burned out on the game before it goes live, and then you lose sort of that player base who was most dedicated to it.
There's that, and that you can get burned out on it, and you can also have it be, or you just get a bad first impression. If it is buggy, or if the graphics are terrible, or whatever, you might lose those people right away. It's like having a bad launch, only it's pretty much guaranteed to be bad. You're obviously going to have some issues. Obviously, though, why they do it is because
they need the money.
They need the money. And even if you talk about a free-to-play game, you look at EverQuest Landmark as an example. You know, right now the only way you can get in is by spending the $50 or $20 or $50, $100 package to get in. So you understand that they do it because, especially when you have a smaller studio, you know, they need that money to keep going, and it really can help. It's not like SOE was going to not make Landmark if they didn't get money now. So, but yeah, it can be a really hard temptation, I imagine, for a lot of these companies, and something they should look at a little more closely rather than just saying, well, it's what everybody's doing now, it's what we should do. I think it's something that you should make sure that you have a more playable game than you should, at your normal development process before you make it available through early access.
Yeah, I think a good example of something that went through early access that actually ended up benefiting would be Loadout, that was free to play. Loadout, actually, when it came out of early access, it added a lot. Like, it added an extra mode of play, it added like some different things, and really sort of tried to spruce the game up for its official launch. So while you had the original game that players were able to play if they were in early access or the beta before the early access, the end result is something that is a lot more tuned, a lot more like fully enveloped, or fully fleshed out with new modes and items and such. And the game that I played in early closed beta is nothing what like Loadout is now, and just in terms of overall customization. So in that case, they got to make sure that a game that transitions from early access to full release, there's a noticeable difference between the two, to sort of draw back those players who maybe got burnt out or had a bad first impressions.
Right. Like we've played Nosgoth, for instance, and that's in early access, alpha, whatever, and
Yeah.
it's okay, but it's kind of small right now. Is it in beta?
It's in beta now. It transitioned into beta.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I mean that's
it
sort
was
of
in alpha and it went into beta. Yes.
It's fun, but it's kind of small still. It hasn't got a whole lot there other than just the basic combat. You hope that there'll be a lot more before they get into launch.
Yeah, and there's definitely things that I think that they can improve in the game. You can see where it's headed, and I think that's the main thing is that a game needs to at least be able to invoke where players can be like, oh, it's at its core, it's fun. It's not like super fun in the long run because I do the same thing over and over, but that's just because there's a lack of content right now.
It's almost like a demo.
Exactly.
It's like you get a demo of the first level of something, you get a feel for it.
But usually you don't pay for demos.
Well, sure, that's
But you do get an idea, at least with free-to-play games a lot of times that go into early access, you do get an idea of what the final game will be before you actually have to pay any money. So in the case of Nosgoth, we can sort of get an idea of how the combat will be. You can see the combat in its close to finished state to see, okay, even if they made improvements to it, it would only be in like a good direction, essentially, because it's already at a nice sort of area where it is, and I can see where the developers sort of fine-tuning it and making it better. All right, so with that being said, our question for this week then is, what's our opinions on cross-platform gaming, guys? What are your opinions on cross-platform gaming? Are you someone who plays a game, say, I don't know, something that's on a browser that you also play on mobile? Do you have a game that you go between? In general, are you just a fan, or would you be a fan of a game like Albion Online that is played cross-platform, or is it too much of a sacrifice for you to be interested? Let us know in the comments, guys. I'm really interested to see what you say about that. But otherwise, that is going to wrap up this episode here of the Free to Play Podcast. We had a lot to talk about, Jason. There was just quite a lot of discussion.
It's been a while.
It has been a while.
Not forever.
Yeah. I'm going to have to go put like an ice cube on my tongue. It's just on fire from all the talking. Jason, where would people go to reach you if they wanted to talk to you about, like, I don't know, your housing, your giant house in Lord of the Rings? They want to go visit it and not make it just sad from 2 guild members?
All right, well, you would find me on Twitter, @WinterInformal. You would also find me occasionally blogging at jasonwinter.wordpress.com, and you'll sometimes find me streaming twitch.tv/jasonwinter. I will also make the deal, if anybody wants to see my house in Lord of the Rings Online, tweet at me, and I will show you my house.
Why don't you just make a video? I'll put it up online. I'll put a video on MMO Bomb of you showing off your house. If you did that and you were like, hey, this is Jason Winter from the Free Pike Podcast. Let me show you.
No, I would say Jason. I'd act as my character. In Lord
of okay. Well, we'll do it in the style of like you know, my crib or whatever. Cribs from
there
MTV.
You go, cribs.
Like this is my I don't know what the equivalent of Lord of the Rings jacuzzi is, but we'll have that in there.
I have a pool that a tentacle comes out and grabs you.
Oh man, there we go. We got tentacle action going on there in Jason's house. You heard it here first, guys. There be tentacles in Jason. Yep. All right. Well, for me, if you want to reach me, you can do so on Twitter /Spunkify. It's not exactly that. There's a .com in there somewhere. But @Spunkify on Twitter, or my email, which is michael@mmobomb.com. Feel free to send me any sort of message or just general nice, warm, comforting thoughts. I tend to prefer those other than the negative "I will kill you" thoughts that sometimes permeate throughout the internet. But that's just my personal preference. Feel free to send me whatever you want, and I guess I'll appreciate it no matter what for your personal opinion. Otherwise, guys, that's going to be it for this episode here of the Free to Play Podcast. I hope you enjoyed. I hope you stuck with us. If you did, just know that Spunkify loves cupcakes. Only you guys at the end of this episode will know that. Only you. Spunkify loves cupcakes. You only will have known that if you watched the end of episode 101. Tell your friends, guys. Until next time. Yep. What, Jason? Are you a cake guy or a cupcake guy?
For cake.
Cake.
Cake over pie.
Jason loves cakes. I love cupcakes. There's an exclusive for you guys right here on the Free to Play Podcast, episode 101. Until next time, guys. We'll see you later. Spunkify and Jason out.